The best thing my godmother ever gave me wasn't the $340,000 check. It was the front row seat to watching my husband's soul leave his body when he realized he'd been outplayed by a dead woman. But before I get to the part where Travis looked like he was swallowing a bag of broken glass, we have to go back to the Tuesday when my life actually fell apart. I was in the middle of a bridal crisis at the Riverfront Hotel. I work as an event coordinator, and on this particular Tuesday, I was dealing with a bride named Kinsley who was hyperventilating because the napkins were eggshell instead of ivory. I was literally holding a color swatch up to the light, trying to talk her off a ledge, when my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was the hospice center. I knew what it was before I even slid the unlock bar. The nurse, a woman named Sarah, who had the kindest voice I'd ever heard, didn't beat around the bush. She told me Octavia, my godmother, my real mom in every way that counted, had passed peacefully in her sleep about 20 minutes ago. I didn't scream. I just felt the air leave the room. I handed the napkin swatches to my assistant, walked into the supply closet where we kept the folding chairs, locked the door, and slid down the wall. I cried so hard that one of the catering staff knocked on the door to ask if I had food poisoning. Octavia was the one who raised me after my biological mother decided parenting was too much work and took off when I was 7. Octavia was a retired librarian who read 3 murder mysteries a week, drove a 15-year-old Honda she named Gus, and had 0 patience for idiots. She was my anchor, and now the line was cut. I left work early, which I never do. I drove home in a fog, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I walked into our house, a charming, historic 2-story that was actually just a money pit with drafty windows, Travis was on the couch. He was playing Call of Duty, wearing his headset, shouting something about a spawn point. He didn't even look up when I walked in. I stood by the TV for a full 10 seconds before he noticed me. "Hey, babe," he said, pulling one earphone off. "You're home early. Dinner?" "Octavia died," I said. My voice sounded wet and jagged. Travis paused. He put the controller down, but he didn't turn off the game. He gave me that sad, puppy dog look he used when he forgot our anniversary. "Oh, damn. Babe, I am so sorry. That sucks." He stood up and gave me a hug that lasted exactly 3 seconds. It was a pat-on-the-back hug, the kind you give a buddy who struck out at a softball game. Then he pulled back, looked me in the eye, and said the words that should have been the first red flag. "So, did she have a will? Like, was there life insurance or anything?" It had been less than a minute. The body wasn't even cold. I stared at him, blinking away fresh tears. "I don't know, Travis. I just found out she's dead." Right, he said, nodding like he was agreeing with a client. "Just practical stuff. We can talk about it later. You want me to order pizza?" I should have packed a bag right then, but grief makes you stupid, and I had been married to this man for 8 years. I mistook his complete lack of empathy for stoicism. I told myself he was just being a guy, trying to fix the problem instead of feeling the feelings. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The funeral was 3 days later. It was humid, that sticky, suffocating southern heat that makes your clothes cling to you like second skin. We were at the graveside service, surrounded by Octavia's friends, mostly retired librarians and members of her gardening club. I was wearing a black dress that I'd bought for a cocktail party 2 years ago and never wore. Travis was wearing khakis and a blue button-down that was slightly too tight across the chest. He refused to wear a suit. He said, "It's a graveside, Jules. Nobody expects a full suit in this heat." While the pastor was talking about Octavia's love for literature and her kindness to stray animals, I felt Travis shifting next to me. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even looking at the casket. He was looking at his Apple Watch. I saw him tap the screen. A text notification popped up. I couldn't read it through my veil and the tears, but I saw him quickly tap a reply with his thumb, hiding the watch face against his thigh. "Can you stop?" I whispered, feeling a flash of irrational anger. "Work emergency," he whispered back, not looking at me. Inventory issue. I'm handling it. He worked in sales for a tech startup. There was no inventory emergency that couldn't wait for 45 minutes. When the service ended, people started lining up to hug me. She was a wonderful woman, Mrs. Gable said, patting my hand. So strong. Travis stood about 3 feet behind me, shaking hands and using his sales voice, that deep, resonant tone he used to close deals. Thanks for coming. Yeah, tough loss. She was a great lady. He sounded like a politician running for re-election. As we walked back to the car, Travis wiped sweat off his forehead. Man, that dragged on. Look, babe, I can't do the reception thing at the church hall. I've really got to get to the office to put out this fire. It's my godmother's funeral reception, Travis, I said, stopping in the middle of the cemetery path. There's going to be ham biscuits. People expect you to be there. I know, he said, checking his watch again. But if I don't fix this server allocation issue, we lose the account. You understand, right? I'm doing this for us. Gotta keep the paycheck coming. I watched him get into his truck, a lifted monstrosity we definitely couldn't afford, and drive away before I even got into Octavia's old Honda. I went to the reception alone. I ate ham biscuits alone. I accepted condolences alone. I told everyone Travis had a crisis at work. I was covering for him even then. 3 days after the funeral, I was sitting on the living room floor surrounded by boxes of Octavia's books I couldn't bear to donate yet. I hadn't washed my hair in 4 days. I was wearing sweatpants that had a hole in the knee. The landline rang. We still had a landline because the cell service in our historic neighborhood was garbage. Travis picked it up in the kitchen. I heard his voice drift down the hall. Hello, yes, this is Travis Mercer. I'm her husband. His tone was somber, respectful. Then there was a pause, a long pause. Wait, I'm sorry, could you repeat that number? Another pause. 340,000? I looked up from the box of Agatha Christie paperbacks. The air in the house seemed to shift. That is incredible news, Travis said. His voice had changed. The somber grief was gone, replaced by a buzzing energy. Yes, absolutely. Tuesday morning works. We'll be there. He hung up the phone and literally jogged into the living room. He wasn't walking. He was bouncing on the balls of his feet. Babe, he said, crouching down next to me, that was Harrison McAllister, your godmother's lawyer. Okay, I said, wiping my nose with a tissue. She left you everything, and apparently everything is a lot more than we thought. 340 grand, Jules. I stared at him. What? Octavia didn't have that kind of money. She was a librarian. She drove a car named Gus. Investments, I guess. Compound interest is a hell of a drug, Travis said, grinning. He sat back on his heels, his eyes scanning the ceiling like he was visualizing a vision board. This is huge. This changes everything. It's just, I can't believe she had that much, I mumbled. It's community property, essentially, Travis said, and the speed at which he pivoted to us was breathtaking. I mean, Georgia isn't technically community property, but we're married. What's yours is ours. We can finally fix the plumbing. We can pay off the credit cards. He paused, a dreamy look on his face. I've been looking at that center console boat. You know, for weekends. We could take it out to the coast. You'd love it. Travis, I said, my voice sharp. She's been dead for a week. I don't want a boat. I'm just brainstorming, babe. God, don't be so negative, he said, standing up and brushing dust off his knees. McAllister wants us at his office on Tuesday for the official reading. I'm going to request the morning off. We need to look sharp. Show him we're responsible investors. He walked back into the kitchen whistling. Actually whistling. My godmother was dead and my husband was Google searching boat prices. Tuesday morning, Travis woke up at 5 a.m. He spent 45 minutes in the bathroom grooming his beard. He tried on 3 different suits. He kept asking me if his blue tie conveyed fiscal responsibility or if the red one was too aggressive. Travis, it's a will reading, not a job interview at Goldman Sachs, I snapped. I was wearing the same black dress from the funeral because I didn't have the energy to care. "Perception is reality, Jules," he said, checking his teeth in the mirror. "We're dealing with a serious estate now. You have to look the part." We drove downtown to Harrison McAllister's office. It was in one of those renovated cotton warehouses on River Street. Exposed brick, heart pine floors, and a chandelier in the lobby that probably cost more than my entire college education. When we walked in, the receptionist, a young woman named Chloe, offered us coffee. It came in actual bone china cups with saucers, not styrofoam. Travis took a sip, holding the pinky out slightly, and winked at Chloe. "Excellent roast," he said. "Single origin?" Chloe blinked. "It's Keurig, sir." "Right. Well, very good," Travis said, not missing a beat. He sat down on a leather sofa and spread his legs wide, taking up as much space as possible. He looked like a peacock trying to mate with the furniture. "I'm just saying," he whispered to me, leaning in. "This lawyer charges $500 an hour, easy. We need to be smart about how we invest this cash. I was thinking crypto is too volatile, but maybe real estate? A rental property?" "Can we just hear what Harrison says first?" I hissed. The heavy mahogany doors opened and Harrison McAllister stepped out. He was exactly what you'd expect. Silver hair, seersucker suit, even though it was only March, and a pair of reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Mrs. Mercer? Mr. Mercer?" he said. His accent was thick, like molasses dripping off a spoon. "Please, come on back." The conference room smelled like old paper and lemon furniture polish. There was a long mahogany table that could seat 20 people. Harrison sat at the head. I sat on his right. Travis sat on his left, leaning forward with his elbows on the table, ready to do business. "First, let me express my deepest condolences," Harrison said, looking at me. "Octavia was a remarkable woman, a valued client for 20 years. Travis nodded solemnly. "She was a pistol. We miss her every day." He had dodged her phone calls for the last 5 years. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Harrison opened a leather folder. "I'll begin with the standard disposition of assets." He started reading. It was exactly what I expected. The house went to me. The jewelry went to me. The contents of the home went to me. Gus, the Honda Civic, went to me. "And regarding the financial assets," Harrison continued, "the savings account at SunTrust, the investment portfolio, and the primary life insurance policy." Travis leaned in closer. I could practically hear him doing the math in his head. "The total value is approximately $342,000, Harrison said. "This is bequeathed solely to Julianne Mercer." "Outstanding," Travis said. He actually slapped the table lightly. "Now, regarding the transfer, we have a joint account at Bank of America. Can we have that wired directly, or do we need to set up a trust first? Just thinking about tax implications." Harrison looked at Travis over his glasses. His expression was unreadable. "The funds will be transferred to an account in Mrs. Mercer's name, as per the instructions." Right. Separate accounts initially, totally standard," Travis said, waving a hand. "We can combine them later. Community assets and all that." "Now," Harrison said, his voice dropping an octave. He closed the first folder and placed his hand on a thick, cream-colored envelope sitting separately on the desk. "Mrs. Whitmore left specific instructions regarding a second document. This is a sealed letter to be read aloud only in the presence of her beneficiary and the beneficiary's spouse." Travis sat back, looking confused. "A letter? Like sentimental stuff?" "Part of the formal testamentary protocol," Harrison said. He reached under the table and pressed a button. The door to the conference room opened silently. 2 large men in dark suits stepped in and positioned themselves against the back wall. They weren't lawyers. They looked like linebackers who moonlit as bouncers. Travis looked around, a nervous smile flickering on his face. What's with the security detail? Is Octavia leaving us the crown jewels?" Harrison didn't smile. He broke the wax seal on the envelope with a sharp crack. "Please remain seated," Harrison said, his eyes locking onto Travis. Travis started bouncing his leg. The nervous energy was back, but now it had an edge of panic. I actually need to hit the restroom real quick. All that coffee. Mr. Mercer, the restroom can wait, Harrison said. It wasn't a request. The guards shifted their weight. Travis froze, halfway out of his chair, then slowly sank back down. Harrison unfolded 3 pages of handwritten stationery. I recognized Octavia's neat, sharp cursive immediately. He cleared his throat and began to read. My dearest Julianne, if you are hearing this, it means I have finally kicked the bucket and can now haunt that miserable excuse for a husband of yours from the great beyond. I gasped. Travis went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I am going to be direct, Harrison read, his voice steady and calm. Death has freed me from the burden of politeness. Travis let out a weird, strangled laugh. Wow, okay. She really held a grudge, huh? Classic Octavia. Always the joker. Travis Mercer is a cheating, lying, parasitic waste of a good last name, Harrison continued, reading louder now to cut over Travis's muttering. And I have spent the last 3 years of my life making absolutely certain that you, Julianne, would find out exactly who you married. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the blood rushing in my ears. Excuse me? Travis said. His voice cracked. Now hold on a second. You can't just read insults into the record. I assure you, Mr. Mercer, I can, Harrison said. I am the executor. 3 years ago, I hired a private investigator named Malcolm King, Harrison read. Not because I'm a paranoid old woman, but because Travis smiled too much for a man married to you, Julianne. I looked at Travis. He was gripping the arms of the leather chair so hard his knuckles were white. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the folder in Harrison's hands like it was a bomb. Happy husbands don't check their phones every 14 seconds at Thanksgiving dinner, Harrison read. I remembered that Thanksgiving. Travis had been glued to his screen. He said he was tracking fantasy football stats. They don't volunteer to run to Publix for cranberry sauce and come back 3 hours later, smelling like perfume that costs more than their wife's Christmas present. This is slander, Travis whispered. You can't do this. Harrison ignored him. He reached into a box on the floor and pulled out a stack of binders. They were thick, black binders, labeled by year. There were 17 of them. He slammed the first one onto the table with a heavy thud. The investigator's report is attached as Exhibit A through Q, Harrison said, flipping the binder open, but for efficiency, I will summarize. Travis looked like he was going to vomit. His face had gone from pale to a sickly shade of gray-green. Travis has been involved in an extramarital relationship with one Sabrina Preston, age 28, for approximately 4 years, Harrison stated. Sabrina. I knew that name. She was a vendor Travis worked with sometimes. I had liked her Instagram posts. 4 years, I whispered. Half our marriage. Ms. Preston resides at the Magnolia Court Apartments, Unit 4B. The lease is in Travis's name. Monthly rent is $1,800. Harrison read. That's a lie, Travis blurted out. I co-signed a lease for a friend. It was a charity thing. Harrison didn't even look up. Paid from a checking account Travis opened at Regions Bank in July 4 years ago. An account you knew nothing about, Julianne. Travis tried to stand up again. I'm leaving. This is illegal. You're violating my privacy. Sit down, son, one of the security guards rumbled. It was the first time he'd spoken. Travis sat. The relationship produced a child, Harrison read. The air left my lungs. A child. Travis Mercer, Jr., born April 14th, 2 years ago, Harrison said. I felt like I'd been punched in the throat. April 14th. I remembered that date. The child's first birthday party was held at Dave & Buster's on Eisenhower Drive, Harrison continued, which Travis attended while telling you, Julianne, that he had a mandatory sales conference in Atlanta that weekend. I closed my eyes. I saw it clearly. Travis sending me a photo of room service pizza. Me sitting on the couch, exhausted from a wedding expo, feeling guilty that he was working so hard for us. He had been playing arcade games with his secret son. He has a son? I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. He does, Harrison said gently. He slid a photo across the table. It was a surveillance shot. Travis, pushing a stroller, laughing at a toddler who looked exactly like him. Travis put his head in his hands. He made a sound like a wounded animal, but I realized quickly it wasn't a sob. He was hyperventilating. The financial analysis is equally remarkably, Harrison said, his voice sharpening. He opened another binder. Over 4 years, Travis has diverted approximately $95,000 to support this secondary household. $95,000, I repeated. We had been saving for a kitchen renovation for 3 years. We ate generic cereal to save money. This includes rent, utilities, and a car payment for Ms. Preston's Nissan Altima, Harrison listed. Wait, I said, a memory surfacing through the shock. His parents, Linda and David, they loaned him $18,000 3 years ago. He said it was for a rental property investment. He said it was for our future. Harrison nodded. Exhibit G. The check from Linda and David Mercer was deposited directly into the Region's bank account and used to purchase the Nissan Altima the following day. He stole from his own parents to buy his mistress a car. There is one final item, Harrison said. He looked at Travis with pure, unadulterated loathing. Octavia updated her life insurance policy 6 months ago. She added Travis as a beneficiary. Travis's head snapped up. His eyes widened. For a split second, I saw hope. He thought she had left him money. He thought he could pay his way out of this. The amount is $1, Harrison said. He slid a single-dollar bill across the polished mahogany table. She included a note, Harrison added. She suggested you frame it as a reminder. One of the security guards coughed to cover a laugh. Get out, I said. It came out quiet, but it filled the room. Travis looked at me, his eyes wet and frantic. Jules, baby, listen. She's twisting everything. It's complicated. I can explain. Get out, I screamed at this time. I stood up and threw the dollar bill at him. Harrison nodded to the guards. They stepped forward. Mr. Mercer, you are trespassing. Please leave before we call the police. Travis scrambled out of the chair. He looked at the binders, then at me, then at the guards. He ran. He literally ran out of the office. I stayed in Harrison's office for another hour. He gave me water. He told me he had a divorce lawyer ready, a woman named Vivian who was known as the Shark. He helped me load the 17 binders into the trunk of Octavia's Honda Civic. I drove home in a daze. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I pulled over about a mile from my house into the parking lot of a CVS because I couldn't breathe. I popped the trunk. I needed to see it again. I needed to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. I opened a binder labeled Financials, Year 2. I started flipping through the pages, receipts, credit card statements. Then I froze. There, taped to a piece of cardstock, was a receipt from Zales, a diamond pendant necklace. Price, $850. My heart stopped. The date on the receipt was 2 weeks ago. For one stupid, pathetic second, my brain tried to save me. Maybe he bought this for me, I thought. Maybe he was planning to surprise me. Maybe he's trying to fix things. Maybe the affair is over, and this was a guilt gift he hasn't given me yet. I stared at the receipt, feeling a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe he still loved me. Then I looked at the date again. February 14th. Valentine's Day. I remembered Valentine's Day. Travis had given me a card, just a card. He said money was tight because of the market downturn. I pulled out my phone and searched for Sabrina Preston on Facebook. Her profile was public. There it was. A post from February 15th. A selfie of a blonde woman holding a toddler, wearing a sparkling diamond pendant. Caption, so spoiled by my man. Best V-Day ever. The hope died. It didn't just die. It was incinerated. I screamed. I sat in the parking lot of that CVS and screamed until my throat felt raw. I got home 10 minutes later. Travis's truck was gone. Good. I ran into the house and went straight to the desktop computer in the study. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped my password 3 times. I needed the digital trail. The binders were great, but I wanted the texts. I wanted the cloud backups. We shared an iCloud account for family sharing, and I knew he backed up his phone there. If I could download his message history, I'd have his own words to hang him with. I logged in. I navigated to the backup folder. iPhone 13 Pro. Last backup. Yesterday, 11:42 p.m. Got you, I whispered. I clicked download. A progress bar appeared. Downloading. 10%, 20%. I watched the blue bar creep across the screen. My heart was hammering against my ribs. 45%, 60%. Suddenly, the screen flickered. A gray box popped up. Error. Source file no longer available. No, I said. No. I refreshed the page. The backup file was gone. I tried to access the Find My feature to locate his phone. The device list refreshed. Travis's iPhone. Removed from account. He was doing it right now. He was somewhere, probably at Sabrina's, wiping everything. He was a tech sales guy. He knew how to nuke a digital footprint. He had probably changed his passwords the second he hit the parking lot at the law office. I sat back in the chair, staring at the blank screen. I'd lost the digital evidence. I'd lost the texts, the photos, the call logs from the cloud. Panic started to rise in my throat. Then I remembered the trunk of the car. I walked to the window and looked down at Gus, the rusty Honda Civic parked in the driveway. Harrison had said there were 17 volumes. Malcolm King, the PI, had printed everything. Hard copies. Travis could wipe the cloud all he wanted. He couldn't remote wipe a 3-ring binder. I grabbed a glass of wine, walked out to the car, and hauled the first box of evidence inside. It was going to be a long night. Harrison McAllister was a gentleman lawyer. He was the kind of guy who used fountain pens and probably owned a velvet smoking jacket. But for what came next, he told me I didn't need a gentleman. I needed a butcher. He sent me to Vivian King. Her office was located in a renovated Victorian mansion on Charlton Street, but the interior looked like the bridge of a spaceship. Everything was glass, chrome, and aggressive modern art that looked like it was screaming. I walked in at 10:00 a.m. on Wednesday, dragging a carry-on suitcase filled with the most damning evidence from Octavia's binders. Vivian didn't offer me coffee. She was standing behind her desk, staring out the window, wearing a suit that was tailored so sharply it could probably cut glass. She turned around when I entered. She was in her 50s with a silver bob haircut that didn't move an inch when she walked. "Harrison sent over the preliminary file," she said. "No hello. No, sorry for your loss." She pointed to a chair. "Sit. Tell me what you want." I sat. "I want a divorce. I want him to hurt. I want to make sure he takes his debt with him." Vivian sat down and opened a file on her iPad. She swiped through a few pages. Adultery, 4 years. Secret child. Misappropriation of marital funds. It's not a divorce case, Julianne. It's an autopsy. "He tried to wipe his phone last night," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I tried to get the cloud back up, but he beat me to it." Vivian let out a short, sharp laugh. It sounded like a bark. "Amateurs. They always think the delete button is magic." She tapped the stack of physical binders I'd put on her desk. "He can't delete paper, honey, and he can't delete the bank subpoenas I'm going to file by noon today." She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Here's the strategy. We don't negotiate. We don't mediate. We file on grounds of adultery, which in Georgia affects alimony. We request a freezing of all assets, and we serve him publicly." "Publicly?" I asked. "Shame is a powerful leverage tool," Vivian said, inspecting her manicure. "Harrison tells me he works at Vanguard Tech. Open floor plan?" "Yes," I said. Perfect, she said. My process server, Rick, loves an audience. We'll have him served today. Now, about the debt. Harrison says there's $95,000 in credit card debt and loans? Yes. He put it all in his name, but you're worried about equitable distribution. Vivian finished for me. Don't be. In Georgia, debt incurred for the benefit of the marriage is shared. Debt incurred to buy your mistress a Nissan Altima? That's all his. We're going to itemize every single transaction, every dinner, every diaper, every hotel room. We will present a spreadsheet that shows exactly how much it cost him to betray you. She looked at me, her expression softening by about 2%. He spent your money to build a second life. We are going to make sure he pays for the demolition. I wasn't there when it happened, obviously, but Rick, the process server, gave me the play-by-play later. It was my one moment of pure, unadulterated joy that week. Vanguard Tech Solutions had a massive sales floor. Travis was the senior sales manager, which meant he had a glass-walled office that looked out over the bullpen of junior sales reps. He loved that office. He felt like a king in a fishbowl. At 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, Rick walked into the lobby. Rick didn't look like a process server. He was dressed in a three-piece charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase, looking like a venture capitalist ready to drop $1 million. He told the receptionist he had urgent, time-sensitive documents regarding a high-value acquisition for Travis Mercer. Travis, thinking he was about to land a massive commission or maybe get headhunted, actually came out to the lobby to greet him. He shook Rick's hand. He was smiling. He probably thought his luck was finally turning around after the disaster at the lawyer's office. Rick let him lead the way back to the glass office. They walked right through the sales floor. Dozens of junior reps were watching. Once they were inside the fishbowl, with everyone watching, Rick opened his briefcase. He didn't pull out a contract. He pulled out a thick packet of documents stapled with blue legal backing. "Travis Mercer?" Rick asked, loud enough for the sound to carry through the open door. "Yes," Travis said, looking confused. "You are served," Rick said, slapping the papers into Travis's chest. "Divorce petition, summons for financial disclosure, restraining order regarding marital assets." Travis froze. Rick turned around and walked out. According to Rick, Travis stood there for a full minute, holding the papers, while his entire sales team stared. Then he slammed his office door so hard the glass wall actually rattled. I got the text from Rick at 2:45 p.m. Package delivered. The Eagle has landed, and he looks pissed. I poured myself a glass of wine and toasted the air. The joy lasted about 4 hours. At 7 p.m., I was in the kitchen, trying to figure out how to operate a single-serve coffee maker because I had never made coffee for just one person before. Bam, bam, bam. Someone was hammering on the front door. "Julianne, open the damn door!" It was Travis. My stomach dropped. I had changed the locks that morning. The locksmith charged me triple for an emergency rush, but it was worth it. But I hadn't expected him to show up this fast. "I know you're in there," he screamed. "This is my house. You changed the locks. That's illegal. You can't lock me out of my own house." I crept into the hallway. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see his silhouette. He was pacing back and forth, waving his arms. "We need to talk," he yelled. "You can't just serve me papers at work. Do you know how embarrassing that was? The whole team saw. You're ruining my career." I stood there, gripping my phone, thumb hovering over 911. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to see him. Suddenly, I heard a new voice. "Hey, asshole!" It was a gravelly, smoke-cured, raspy voice. Mrs. Donovan from next door. Mrs. Donovan was 78 years old, wore floral bathrobes 24/7, and smoked Virginia Slims on her porch swing. We had barely spoken in 8 years, other than a polite wave. I always thought she hated us. "Who are you calling an asshole?" Travis snapped. You cheap suit," Mrs. Donovan barked. I peeked through the peephole. She was standing on her lawn, wearing a pink robe, holding a garden hose in one hand and a cigarette in the other. "Stop banging on that door. People are trying to watch Wheel of Fortune." "This is none of your business, you crazy old bat," Travis yelled. "I'm trying to talk to my wife." "Your wife?" Mrs. Donovan laughed. It was a terrifying sound. "Is that the one inside? Or the blonde one you bring by on Tuesdays when Julianne is at her book club?" The silence that followed was heavy. I don't know what you're talking about," Travis stammered. "Don't lie to me, son," Mrs. Donovan said, pointing her cigarette at him like a weapon. "I'm retired and I have insomnia. I see everything. I have a logbook, blue Nissan Altima, arrives 7:15 p.m., leaves 9:30 p.m. Dates and times. I wrote it down because you park like an idiot and block my driveway." Travis stared at her. You have a logbook?" "I do," Mrs. Donovan said. "And if you don't get off that porch in 10 seconds, I'm going to give that logbook to Julianne, and then I'm going to spray you with this hose." She raised the garden hose. She wasn't bluffing. Travis looked at the door, then at Mrs. Donovan, then back at the door. He cursed, kicked a flower pot over, and stormed off toward his truck. "And don't come back!" Mrs. Donovan shouted after him, "or I'm calling the cops." I unlocked the door and stepped out onto the porch as Travis's truck peeled away. Mrs. Donovan was lighting a fresh cigarette. "Mrs. Donovan," I said, my voice shaky. "Thank you." She blew a plume of smoke into the humid night air. "Don't mention it, honey. Men are trash. And tell your lawyer I got dates going back to 2021. I write everything down." I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The Mercer family operates like a hydra. Cut off one head and 2 parents show up at your workplace. 3 days later, on Monday, I was in my office at the Hyatt, going over catering menus. My assistant, Sarah, knocked on the door. She looked terrified. Julianne, there are 2 people here to see you. They say they're your in-laws. They just walked past security." Before I could answer, the door flew open. Linda and David Mercer marched in. Linda was a small woman with hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde concrete. She was wearing her church auxiliary face, tight smile, cold eyes. David trailed behind her, looking like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. "Julianne," Linda said, closing the door behind her, "we need to have a conversation." "I'm working, Linda," I said, standing up. "And I don't think my lawyer wants me talking to you." "Oh, stop with the lawyers," Linda said, waving a hand dismissively. "This has gone too far. Travis told us everything." "Did he?" I asked. "Did he really?" "He told us you're hysterical with grief over Octavia," Linda said, sitting down in a client chair without being asked. "He told us he made one mistake, a brief lapse in judgment, and you're blowing it out of proportion to get your hands on that inheritance money." I actually laughed. "A brief lapse? Linda, he has a 2-year-old child." "A mistake," Linda hissed. "Men have needs, Julianne. Maybe if you had been more attentive, maybe if you had given him a child of his own." "Linda," David warned, looking at the floor. "No, David, she needs to hear this," Linda continued. "Marriage is about forgiveness. It's godly to forgive. You can't just throw away 8 years because of one stumble. And dragging our name through the mud, serving him at work, it's vindictive. It's cruel." "He told you it was a one-time thing?" I asked, walking around my desk. "Yes," Linda said. "He said the woman meant nothing. He said he's ended it." "And the money?" I asked. "Did he tell you about the money?" "He said you're hoarding the inheritance," Linda said, "which is legally questionable, by the way." "I'm talking about your money, Linda," I said. "The $18,000 you loaned him 3 years ago." Linda blinked. "The investment loan? For the rental property? What about it?" "He told you he bought a rental property, right? Something to build equity?" "Yes," David spoke up. "He showed us the prospectus, a duplex in Ardsley Park." I picked up my phone. I had the PDF from Octavia's binder saved to my favorites. "David, Linda, come look at this," I said, holding the phone out. They hesitated, then leaned in. I zoomed in on the document. It was a split-screen image Malcolm the PI had created. On the left was the copy of the check from David and Linda Mercer for $18,000. On the right was a bill of sale from Savannah Nissan. Date of check, June 4th, I read. Date of car purchase, June 5th. I swiped to the next photo. It was Travis and Sabrina standing in front of a blue Nissan Altima at the dealership. Travis had his arm around her. She was holding a set of keys and beaming. The license plate frame said Nissan of Savannah. "He didn't buy a duplex," I said, my voice dead calm. "He used your retirement money to buy his mistress a car." Linda stared at the phone. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked at the date. She looked at the check number. It was undeniable. "And here," I said, swiping again, "here are the credit card statements. You know that business trip to Miami last year? The one you guys gave him $500 spending money for? Here's the receipt for a suite at the Fontainebleau. 2 guests. Couples massage. Room service champagne." David made a choking sound. He sat down heavily in the other chair. His face was gray. He told me that money was for a down payment," David whispered. He looked me in the eye. "He lied," I said. "He's been lying to all of us for 4 years. The rental property doesn't exist. The investment portfolio doesn't exist. He took your money, he took my money, and he spent it on an apartment for Sabrina Preston." Linda stood up. She looked shaky. The concrete hair seemed to tremble. That can't be true. Travis wouldn't. "Go check the VIN number on that Nissan," I said. "Go drive by Magnolia Court Apartments, apartment 4B. Ask for Sabrina. Ask to see the baby who looks exactly like your son." Linda looked at David. "We're leaving." "Linda, wait," David said, staring at the floor. "We are leaving," she snapped. She walked to the door, opened it, and didn't look back. She didn't apologize. She didn't say goodbye. She just fled from the truth. David looked at me. There were tears in his eyes. I didn't know, Julianne, I swear." "I know, David," I said softly. "But now you do." He nodded, stood up slowly like an old man, and followed his wife out. After the parents left, the silence in Savannah started to break. Savannah is a small town masquerading as a city. Everyone knows everyone. And once the divorce filings were public, Vivian made sure of that, the gossip mill went nuclear. I didn't have to do anything. I just sat back and let gravity do the work. First, it was the job. I heard about it from Melanie, Travis's sister. She was the only one in the family who still talked to me. She had texted me a simple, "I believe you," after I sent her the evidence file. We met for coffee 2 weeks later. Melanie looked exhausted. "He got demoted," Melanie said, stirring her latte aggressively. "Vanguard had a client revolt. Apparently, 2 of his biggest accounts heard about the situation. They didn't want a sales rep with character issues. They pulled him off the leadership track. He's back to cold calling." "Ouch," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "And the church," Melanie continued. "First Baptist? The deacons asked him to step down as an usher. They said his lifestyle choices were incompatible with their family values ministry. Mom is mortified. She hasn't been to Sunday service in 3 weeks." "How is he handling it?" I asked. "Badly," Melanie said. "He's broke, Julianne. Like really broke. Mom and Dad cut him off completely. Dad told him to pay back the 18 grand or he's writing him out of the will. So now he's living with her." "With Sabrina?" "Yep, in that tiny apartment, with the toddler." Melanie grimaced. "I went over there to drop off some of his mail. It was grim. The baby was screaming. The TV was blaring. Sabrina looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She asked me if Travis was going to get access to your inheritance soon." I laughed. "She thinks she's getting a payday?" "She thinks you're the villain holding the money hostage," Melanie said. "Travis is telling her that once the judge sees the truth, he'll get half." "Oh," I said, smiling. "I can't wait for him to explain that truth to Judge Reeves." The preliminary hearing was set for late April. The Chatham County Courthouse was a depressing building that smelled of floor wax and despair. I walked in with Vivian. I was wearing a navy blue suit that made me feel like armor. Vivian was wearing red. She looked like she was going to a gala where the entertainment was a human sacrifice. We walked into the courtroom, and there they were, Travis and Sabrina. He actually brought her. I stopped in the aisle. He brought her? I whispered to Vivian. Is he insane? Vivian's eyes lit up. Oh, this is a gift. This is a Christmas morning gift. Judges hate it when you bring the mistress to the hearing. It shows a complete lack of remorse. Sabrina was younger than me, obviously. She was pretty in a sort of unfinished way. She was wearing a floral dress that was too short for court and looking around nervously. Travis was whispering to her, holding her hand. He looked tired. His suit looked a little loose. When he saw me, his jaw tightened. He whispered something to Sabrina, and she glared at me, a genuine glare, like I was the other woman. We sat down. The gallery was half full of bored lawyers and a few random citizens. All rise, the bailiff shouted. Judge Claudia Reeves walked in. She was a legend in Chatham County. She had been on the bench for 30 years. She had zero tolerance for nonsense, and even less for men who thought they were smarter than her. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the docket. Mercer versus Mercer. Petitioner is present, Vivian said, standing up. Julianne Mercer, represented by Vivian King. Respondent is present, Travis's lawyer said. He was a guy named Barry, a strip mall lawyer who looked like he slept in his car. Travis Mercer. Judge Reeves looked over her glasses at Travis. Then her eyes slid to Sabrina sitting in the front row. And who is the young woman in the gallery? Judge Reeves asked. Barry cleared his throat. That is Ms. Preston, Your Honor. She is a support person for Mr. Mercer. A support person, Judge Reeves repeated. She looked at the file in front of her. Is this the same Ms. Preston listed in the investigative report as the co-respondent in the adultery claim? Yes, Your Honor, Barry said. He was sweating. Bold strategy, Judge Reeves said dryly. Mr. Mercer, you are asking for temporary spousal support and access to the inheritance funds for legal fees. Is that correct? Travis stood up. Yes, Your Honor. My wife has seized all our assets. I have no access to cash. I have a child to support. A child born of an extramarital affair, Judge Reeves corrected, while you were married to the petitioner. Yes, but the money she received was a windfall, Travis said, trying to use his sales voice. It changed our financial landscape. It should be considered marital property because we were married when she received it. Judge Reeves picked up a document. I have read the will of Octavia Whitmore. It is quite specific. To my goddaughter, Julianne, separate property. And I have also read the letter attached as Exhibit Q. Travis flinched. Mr. Mercer, the judge said, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. You have admitted to diverting $95,000 of marital funds to support Miss Preston over 4 years. You are now living with Miss Preston. You brought Miss Preston to my courtroom. You have mistaken this courtroom for a negotiation, sir, Judge Reeves said. It is a reckoning. Request for access to inheritance is denied. Request for spousal support is denied. In fact, I am granting the petitioner's request for a temporary order assigning all marital debt incurred in the last 4 years solely to you, pending final trial. What? Travis shouted. That's nearly $100,000. I can't pay that. Then perhaps you shouldn't have spent it on apartments and cars you couldn't afford, Judge Reeves said. I suggest you sell the Nissan Altima. Next case. She banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. It took 3 days for Travis to fold. Without access to the inheritance money and with the debt legally pinned to him, he was drowning. Barry, his lawyer, called Vivian on Friday morning. They want to settle, Vivian told me. We were in her office drinking champagne. He'll sign everything. No claim on the house, no claim on the money, full responsibility for the debt. He just wants one thing. What? An NDA, Vivian said. He wants a non-disclosure agreement preventing you from sharing the investigative report or the details of the divorce with anyone else. He's terrified his bosses will see the details and fire him for cause. I swirled the champagne in my glass. I thought about Mrs. Donovan. I thought about his parents. I thought about the church. "No," I said. "Julianne," Vivian warned. "If we go to trial, it costs money. This is a clean break." "I won't sign a gag order," I said. "I won't promise to lie for him. I won't be a secret keeper anymore." Vivian smiled, a shark smile. "Okay, how about this? We agree to a no active distribution clause. You agree not to post the documents on social media or mail them to his employer proactively. But if anyone asks you, his employer, his family, a future partner, you reserve the right to answer honestly and provide documentation if requested." I thought about it. "So if his boss asks me why I divorced him, you can tell him everything," Vivian said. "If the church asks, you can show them the photos. You just can't rent a billboard." "Deal," I said. Travis signed the papers 2 days later. He hated the clause, but he had no choice. He was cornered. Update. 3 months later. The pasta in Italy really is different. I don't know if it's the flour or the water or just the fact that you're eating it while looking at the Tyrrhenian Sea, but it tastes like life. I was sitting on the terrace of a small hotel in Positano. The sun was setting, turning the water into a sheet of hammered gold. I had a glass of Barolo in one hand and a book in the other. It was July. The divorce was final. My name was Julianne Whitmore again. I had taken Octavia's last name. It felt right. My phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up. A text from a number I didn't have saved, but I knew who it was. Travis. "I hope you're happy. You ruined my life." I looked at the message. 3 months ago, that would have made me angry. It would have made me want to type back a furious paragraph about how he ruined his own life, how he built a bomb and sat on it. But here, in the warm Italian air, I just felt nothing. He was just a ghost. A sad, broke ghost living in a cramped apartment with a woman who was already realizing she'd won a booby prize. I didn't reply. I deleted the thread and blocked the number. Then another text came in. This one was from Melanie. Melanie. Photo attachment. I opened it. It was a picture taken from a distance at a family barbecue. Travis was sitting in a lawn chair holding a beer, staring at the ground. He looked 10 years older. In the background, Sabrina was arguing with someone. It looked like Travis's mom, who had apparently started speaking to them again just to criticize Sabrina's parenting. Melanie. "Thought you might appreciate the view. Mom is currently explaining to Sabrina why her potato salad is a sin against God. Wish you were here." I smiled. I typed back, "I like my view better." I put the phone down. I raised my glass to the empty chair across from me. "To Octavia," I whispered. The best gift wasn't the money. The money was nice. It paid for the trip, the renovation, the freedom. But the real gift was the exit door. She saw the cage I was in before I even realized it was locked, and she left me the key. I took a sip of wine, watched the sun dip below the horizon, and for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was just living. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here,